Okay, our next witness is Dr. Jean Seaton. She's Professor of Media History at the University of Westminster and official historian of the BBC. Jean has written widely on the history and role of the media in politics, security issues and religion, as well as news and journalism, and is particularly interested in the impact of the media on children. In 2007, she became chair of the Orwell Prize, taking over from Sir Bernard Crick, and is chair of the judges for the Guardian Fabian Ben Pimlott Political History Essay Prize. Jean.
When I was a child, when you went on a beach, my mother made me the most wonderful garment, which was a towel sewed down both sides with a rope around the neck, so that when you got undressed on the beach, you could get undressed completely without anybody seeing you. And this was a thrilling technological development, because otherwise you had to try and hold the towel to keep you clear. Of course, my own children on beaches just took off all their clothes, and my middle son and lots of neuroscientists from Oxford and his girlfriend and 1,785 other people on Saturday at the beginning of Bike Week biked through London wearing nothing. Now, the point of that is that mores change. Do you see? Mores change. They mutate. And I feel just as comfortable on the beach taking my swimming costume off because I can't be bothered, as I felt uncomfortable. I was always rather a stroppy little girl underneath this extraordinary towel thing. Mores change, and you feel them to be actually deeply part of yourself. That's the way in which mores work. And I think what I wanted to really enter into the debate is that we live in a kind of argument in which it says that everything is getting more public, everything is getting more known, everything is more transparent. I'm terribly in favour of opacity, actually. I kind of start a campaign for opacity. Not least because some things cannot be said. There are some things you do not say to your child. There are some things you certainly wouldn't say in front of your son. There are some things you say with somebody you're married to, or that you're very trusting with, that you wouldn't say in other circumstances because you're testing them out. And in the centre of government, people have to test things out in the John Stuart Mill way, but you don't necessarily want them to go out. So I want to say two things, one of which is that mores change do not believe that we are just on an arrow that gets us towards more transparency and openness. In the 18th century, they were terribly, in favour of some kinds of communication. In the 19th century, that all shut down. Robespierre, during the French Revolution, said that what he wanted was transparency of souls. Now, this wasn't a nice man in favour of transparency of souls. This was Robespierre demanding transparency. So I want to say two things, one of which is that I think that people always get terribly befuddled by the contemporary and think that is the only thing, and it's going to develop to be more and more of that. That is not true. And history shows one that, and that sensibilities change enormously. And secondly, that actually I think that what we need is a more grown-up recognition. I quite recently did a class about reading, and we did Facebook, because that's what I'd asked them, what was the first thing you read in the morning? Very simple question. Of course, for my generation, it would have probably been, I don't know, cereal packet, don't know, a newspaper. And they'd all read Facebook before they came out. So we then looked at how you read Facebook. So, I understand people are putting stuff out, but I think we need a more negotiated wrenching back to some understanding of that which is secret and in our souls and needs to be secret for moments. We need to negotiate that more. And secondly, just that mores will change, and people won't be in the same place that they are. And how awful it would be if mores didn't change. How devastating if the only way forward was that way, because it would be very, the future would be predictable.
Jean, thank you very much. I'll kick off before going over to Stephen. I'm very interested in this mores issue because I think you can argue that one of the paradoxes of the modern human condition is that human beings have created things which they no longer know how to control, and technology is arguably one of those things. So I think a lot of people would have sympathy with your view, but also great pessimism about the capacity of human beings to be able, as it were, to pull back something which is now... Because in a sense, if something's technologically possible, it happens. Yeah. It turns out that Say's law sort of applies to everything. 500 million questions a day asked of Google. And the interesting thing is, what happened to all those questions before Google? The supply creates its own demand, and in a sense the supply of all this stuff creates the demand for all this stuff. And how on earth would you reverse it? That's my question.
I'm sure you won't reverse it. If I may say so, I'm sure he's right that we have to define things. But it's also very important to understand what we still don't know. That's say there is this extraordinary notion of super availability, but we still don't know what's happening on the back streets of Kandahar very well. In fact, we don't understand what's going on the back streets of Kandahar very well. Indeed, in Britain, for instance, I know from my own research, we know far less about India than we did in the 1970s, because the agenda took us to India much more than it does now. So I think another sort of answer I want to give to you is that we've got to work out what we know more of and what we know less of, but it's wrong to say that we just know more about everything. And secondly, the human agency seems to me just, again, another old problem. I imagine that's what people felt like when they laid the railway line, that this was unanswerable. Capitalism is an incredible system for producing enormous benefits and an enormous machine that makes people feel they're living in the side of it. But, actually people are so creative. So I think I don't know what the answers is. And what I would actually say about you is, if I may, is that I think you're right, you have to keep your eye on your children, but what you always do is let your children go. What you do is let them go. And that's what you're supposed to do as a parent. So you let them go skilled upright, and then they get beaten up on Upper Street. And then they learn not to go down Upper Street carrying a cricket bat. But one beating up is okay. So I think it's complicated, but it's quite useful. It's quite useful. And not bad beating up is a really good learning experience. It's fine. So I think one has to... I think one negotiates everything with children, and it depends on the roles of families and things. Anyway.
Mores change, morals are constant. What is the morality here? I've heard it suggested that Europeans, for example, are far more sensitive than Americans about financial information, because they're steeped in an aristocratic tradition which suggests it's really not the done thing to talk about your money. And there was indeed an article in the Yale Law Review, I think, which in fact the title was, "Why is it that French people won't talk about their salaries but will take their bikini tops off?" And it sort of points to a sort of, partly what you're saying about mores, but more fundamentally to the argument underneath it about dignity versus liberty.
I don't think that whether you talk about your money is a moral issue, but I think moral issues. I'm always incredibly uncomfortable talking about morality. But I think that treating other people properly and with concerned, engaged respect can be done in all sorts of genres, as it were. I think that's and you have to be, what you do is listen to what other people, when you're in a conversation with somebody, you try and hear and feel what they need to say to you, and we need to do that to other cultures up to a point. So I think it's about manners, but I think it's about engaged concern with other people produces morality, and that's why I think this kind of territory will develop. It'll be fine.
It's easy to get hung up on the technology, but it seems to me a bigger issue. What do you think about the shifting sands in relation to public and private lives? Politically. We have accepted that politicians now have the right to tell us what we do in our private lives and much more. They tell us how to parent, they tell us whether we can drink or smoke, how much to drink and smoke, etc., etc., etc. These things were considered private. They are now, even the privacy of your home is not the privacy of your home. They're in there. And do you think that is more significant, a shift, not in terms of mores, but in terms of a political sensibility in relation to privacy, than anything that has been thrown up by Facebook? Which is a technical expression of something.
I think the politics of behaviour are the politics that we're in at the moment, and we need to talk about that more. I think that technology is very interesting. We've had mobile technologies that are very personalised. You could say the book actually is incredibly mobilised, but trust and all sorts of things in our lives are becoming very much more personalised. But I think that I think that I can't remember what I said first. That's what I think.
Jean Seaton, thank you very much.